What's up, y'all? It's Cool and Steven. I'm back with another YouTube video. Happy first day of spring. I know it's been a while since I've been on, but here we are with Vol.9 of Cool and Steve's Wild World of Sports. So happy y'all tuned in. Hope y'all doing well. Had a lot of things going on. That's why I haven't recorded as much, but happy to be back in the saddle. All right, guys, now let's go ahead and hop into the NBA because we have a lot to talk about with sports. And we'll take a look at the standings for both the East and the Western Conference. And, pretty much what I've said all year, when you look at these standings, you look at the top 10 in the East, and I'm going to show the top 10 in the West in a moment. The 10 teams that are in contention are the 10 teams that I've been showing you, it seems like, for months and months now. And at this point, it's not going to change because we only got about 11 to 12 games left. Now, you look at these 10 games. You look at these 10 teams, rather, that are on top in the East. Of course, Detroit's 1, you got Boston at 2, New York at 3, and Cleveland at 4. I feel pretty confident that those are going to be the top 4 seeds in the Eastern Conference. You do have the 5th seed that's about 4 games back of the Cavs, but barring a pretty huge collapse, that's pretty much what we're going to get in the first round of the playoffs. And then, of course, you have, after that, from 5 through 10, it's almost anyone's ball game. It's very, very close there in the East. Between teams like the Raptors, the Hawks, who recently gotten very, very hot as of late, right? The Sixers, the Heat, the Magic, the Hornets, just all those teams that are in that cluster between 5 through 10 there in the Eastern Conference. And also, it's also worthy to note that all these teams have winning records. The East has long had a bad reputation as what they call the Leastern Conference. I still don't think it's the stronger of the two, but I think that the playoffs are going to be very, very compelling because a lot of these teams are pretty evenly matched. And I think even some of these teams that make it out of the play-in, I think they're really going to give even the top 4 seeds a run for their money. Now, I'm going to get to the Pistons in a second and see why some of these lower teams may have a better chance in the playoffs against them. But that's the situation out East. Like I said, it's the same 10 that we've had for the last couple of Wild World of Sports volumes. It's not going to change at this point because it's not that much time left in the regular season. The Western Conference of the two conferences, as we look at their standings now, are definitely the clearer to the extent of the two, at least when you look at the play-in situation. You look at that 6th seed, Minnesota. They're tied with Denver, but the Denver Nuggets have the tiebreaker. They're 4 games up on the Suns. Not that the Suns can't make up that deficit, but they're going to have to get really, really hot, really, really fast. And the Timberwolves are going to have to get cold, and the Nuggets probably too, since they're tied. So that situation seems a little bit clearer. It looks like it's going to be the Suns, the Clippers, the Trailblazers, and the Warriors in some order in that play-in slot. And then, of course, you look at the top. The Lakers are hot, but as high as they've been, they're actually not the hottest team in the league. That would belong to the OKC Thunder. Shai Gilgeous has come back from the injury issue that he had around the All-Star break, and he's a lot hotter for you now. So, yeah, guys, Oklahoma City has been rolling, and the way that San Antonio is on their tails, however, they're going to have to keep it rolling because they're only 3 games back of the Thunder as high as they are. So both of those teams look like they'll reach the 60-win mark on the regular season. Now, OKC did get into a fight the other day with the Wizards in their win over Washington the other day. So they'll probably have a couple of their guys out with suspension. We'll see how long that is for. But it's been very impressive to see how Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has really carried this team more so this year than he did last year in his MVP campaign. In the absence of Jalen Williams, that's a situation that's going to have to be monitored because it is a hamstring, and it's just one of those really tricky things where you don't really know how somebody's going to respond to. So we'll see if he's back for the playoff run. Hopefully he is. That'll bolster their chances, of course, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander looks like he's well on his way to his 2nd MVP award, which will be more impressive this year, not only because of the circumstances that he's had carrying the Thunder more so this year, but also with all the other great MVP candidates that we have. It's about 6 really, really strong MVP candidates. So for him to have this season, it's really incredible, and the Thunder are white hot right now. So it definitely looks like OKC and San Antonio will be the top 2 teams in the West. That 3 to 6 cluster looks like it'll be some form of the Lakers, Rockets, the Timberwolves, and the Nuggets. The Lakers have done themselves lots of favors by having this 9-game winning streak. More on them later. I'll do a short on them later. But speaking of LA, shout out to LeBron James, who now, with yesterday's game against the Orlando Magic, is now the all-time leader in the regular season in games played. He surpassed Robert Parrish's record, so that's another record onto the great LeBron James's ledger. Now, you guys heard me mention the Detroit Pistons a minute ago, and the reason I mentioned them is because they are going to be without their top star, Mr. Cade Cunningham, for at the very least an extended period of time. Basically, it's an indefinite injury that he suffered earlier last week against the Wizards. Basically a routine play. He was going for a loose ball on defense. The player collapsed kind of on top of him in a bit of an awkward way, but if you look at the replay, it doesn't look like he sustained the injury that he did, but he did. He basically has what they call a pneumothorax, which is essentially a collapsed lung. So he left the game early. He was kind of sitting on the floor for a minute, trying to regather himself, get his bearing, and then he sat on the bench, and then they took him to the back. So he's out for an indefinite amount of time, as you said. We don't know how long it's going to be. It's a pretty rare injury to be suffered in the NBA. It's commonly seen in contact sports like the NFL. So hopefully, obviously his health is first and foremost, his life is first and foremost. That is a pretty serious injury, a scary one when you consider a collapsed lung. Obviously, as we all know, we need that to breathe. So hopefully he's okay. And hopefully, for the Pistons' sake and for Detroit's sake, he's back for the playoffs because they're on a burner. They've been on a burner all this year. And I can't wait to see what they do in the playoffs. But hope they're going to need him if they're going to make a push to the NBA Finals for sure, because he is an MVP candidate. I even said at one point in the year that he very well may be the MVP. It's looking like that's going to be SGA now, but he's definitely needed for that Pistons playoff push in the East, but his health is first and foremost. So hopefully Cade Cunningham comes out of this okay, and he's back and ready to go for the playoffs. Now, speaking of coming back from injuries, I don't know if I covered this in the last one, but Jayson Tatum is back. He came back from the Achilles injury a couple weeks ago against Dallas, and he's looked pretty good. Now, Jaylen Brown has kind of taken the reins as that number one option this year for sure. And, Jayson Tatum's kind of playing himself back into game shape. But for the limited amount of time that he's played so far, and he's played about 25 to 30 minutes a game, but he's looked good. Kind of slotting into that role. I think he's kind of buying his time for the playoffs. And I think in the playoffs, that's when we'll see him get unleashed a little bit more as the Celtics make that title push. Obviously, that was a big upset, them losing to the Knicks last year, and that's something they want to avenge, but now they got a new challenger, hopefully, like I said, with the Detroit Pistons. You got other teams, the Cleveland Cavaliers getting James Harden, even that big cluster from 5 through 10 through the East. A lot of those teams look kind of dangerous. They look like, I don't know if they can beat Boston, but they definitely look like they can push Boston, because after Jaylen Brown, it's pretty much an ensemble cast with the Celtics, more so than it was in years past when they won the championship. So we'll see if Boston can make that push. They're kind of buying their time right now. Obviously, you got the Knicks lurking. That was a lot of teams' favorites before this year started. The Cavs were a lot of teams' favorites as well. We'll have to see how all these teams fare out in the Eastern Conference playoffs, but it's going to be interesting to watch for sure. All right, guys, now let's talk about Bam Adebayo and that classic 83-point game performance that he put on a couple weeks ago against the Washington Wizards back on the 10th. He shot the ball. He had 43 field goal attempts. He had 43 free throw attempts. This man almost shot the ball 100 times in the game, guys. That's how crazy that was. But, of course, there's a lot of discourse on social media about it, and weirdly enough, it seems like people aren't really embracing that performance the way that I imagine, or at least in hindsight, they embraced Wilt's 100-point game performance, which is still the record, of course, and not nearly as embraced as Kobe's 81 was back in 2006 against the Raptors. And even some of the 70-point game performances, this one's been a little bit more scrutinized, right? Because all those other performances didn't happen during the social media era. This one does, and I think there's a couple of reasons for that. Now, one reason I don't think it's as embraced is because of the way it happened. Now, you look at most of these high scoring performances, they're usually against bad teams. I think the only exception I can think of was when Devin Booker scored 70 a few years back against the Celtics and they lost. Most of the other ones are against pretty inept teams. So, kind of an unfair criticism on Bam's part. But, you play who's in front of you, but, it is what it is. The Wizards are one of the worst teams in the league, so there's that. So there's this notion that they kind of let him do whatever he want. And I don't think that's fully fair, like I said, to Bam. You even have certain players who have come out and they're bashing the free throws in particular, the fact that a big man shot 43 free throws. Now, in a lot of these other high-scoring games, I'm pretty sure a lot of these other guys that scored 70-plus got to the free throw line quite a bit more than they normally do. But, 43 free throws is a lot, and he made 36 of them. So, credit to Bam on him. If you want to put shame on anyone, put shame on the Wizards for playing bad defense. But instead, they're kind of going about it as if that's not a noble way to score 83. To me, 83 points is 83 points. But personally, I think that's the reason that most people are using to try to cope with it. But I think part of the real reason why they're upset at this 83-point per game performance, or I would say maybe not upset, but they're not embracing it like they should, is because of who did it. Now, this isn't an indictment on Bam Adebayo, the person, but more on Bam Adebayo, the player. There's a very, very short list of people in today's game who we could have as seeing, scoring 70 plus in the game. Maybe Shea, Luka, guys like that. Bam Adebayo's not on that list. And he's just not, that's not what he's known for as a scorer. He's more known as an all-around good player, right? Rebounding, passing for a big man, obviously a great defender. And he's had a really great career so far. He's a multiple-time All-Star, multiple-time All-Defensive player. He's usually in the running for Defensive Player of the Year. He's been on the last 2 Olympic gold medal teams for Team USA. So he's had a storied career. He's helped lead a team to the NBA Finals a couple of times, actually. So really good career, but he's not really somebody that we look at and that's a scorer, right? All these other guys are scorers. Devin Booker, David Robinson, I believe David Thompson back in the day had 70 plus. Obviously, Wilt, Kobe. These are guys that we would label as scorers. Bam doesn't fit that archetype. So a lot of it is shock, I think, that somebody like that could score that many points in a game. And the other reason is who he passed. Obviously, he surpassed Kobe Bryant's 81. Now he's second all time in points scored in the game. As we all know, Kobe Bryant has a lot of diehard fans, dare we say cultish-like fans who are very ardent in their support, in their defense for Mr. Kobe Bean Bryant. So, that's one of those things that's par for the course. It's really nothing against Bam himself, but if anybody were to pass that mark, there's going to be something to have a problem with it. It's one of those things in the social media age that we just got to deal with. But yeah, that's my take on the whole thing. I think it was more shock more so than anything else. And I'll be honest, even though I don't agree with most of the other sentiments that most other people have about the performance, yes, I was shocked as well. I did not have Bam Adebayo scoring 83 points on my bingo card of things that would happen during the NBA season. But here we are. It doesn't really matter my surprise levels or anyone else's surprise levels. The facts are, it is a great performance. It was an all-time great performance by Bam. And like Shaq said, if you have the chance to make history, you go for it. Full speed ahead. So props to Bam for doing that. Of course, he did it with his girlfriend, the best player in the WNBA, Miss Aja Wilson, in attendance. So that obviously helps things when you have that, as well as his mother was there. So I can definitely see why he had an extra little bit of motivation to get something done like that. So hats off to Bam. Shout out to Bam Adebayo. And one last bit of NBA news to pass along before we move on is that the NBA Board of Governors meeting is happening this week in a couple of days, as a matter of fact, and the NBA will decide to vote on whether they will expand to 32 teams starting in the 2028-2029 season. And they are targeting two cities, that being Las Vegas and Seattle, as most people have predicted, as I predicted for really the past couple of years now. Adam Silver's kind of kicked the can around as to if they're going to do it, when they're going to do it, maybe some other cities that they're looking at. But most people projected it was going to be Vegas and Seattle. And we have come to this day where it looks like it's projected to be passed. I believe 23 out of the 30 owners in the league will have to approve of this deal for it to be officially passed. But as I said, it's projected to happen. So very little shock there. And then, of course, there's been a lot of talk about, hey, those two teams are going to the West. So that means one team will have to go to the East. It looks like it's either going to be Minnesota or Memphis. I figured New Orleans would be in the running too, but it's most likely going to be one of those two teams. And to me, it actually looks like Minnesota has more momentum to be the team that moves to the Eastern Conference, just because they're so much further away from every other Western Conference team. And they're a lot closer to those Midwestern teams in the East, such as, the Bulls and the Pistons and the Pacers, the Bucks. They're pretty close to those teams. So I see that happening. Obviously, that'll make 16 teams in the West, 16 in the East, and it will, help balance some things out with the Eastern Conference, because the Timberwolves are a stronger Western Conference team now that they've made the conference finals back-to-back years. They have a superstar in Anthony Edwards. Hopefully, he'll still be with the team when the Sonics and I'm assuming the Seattle Supersonics is what they're going to rename them, and the Vegas team starts playing in 2028, 2029. But yes, I like the move. Memphis makes sense, but I think Minnesota makes more sense. There's also been a few talks. I don't know if it's a push or what, but to try to get Memphis away, or to try to get the Grizzlies away from Memphis and potentially move them over to Nashville. Now, there is an arena that's already ready for an NBA team in Nashville, because they have a hockey team and the Predators that play there. And there's a lot of talk that Nashville is a growing city, a rapidly growing city. So that could be a move. I'm not sure how Memphis feels about that, but Nashville is growing, so it wouldn't be the worst market to have an NBA team in. I'm not really for or against it. I think they're fine where they're at in Memphis, but that's just me. But regardless, I think Minnesota, makes a little bit more sense moving to the East, since they're so much closer to those teams. Now, the other thing that some people are giving pushback on about expansion is the whole notion that with 30 teams already, the league is already spread a bit thin with talent, and there's just a lot of bad teams there at the bottom, from former players and coaches, current players and coaches, social media commentators alike. They're all kind of pushing this sentiment, but I have 2 points to quickly push back on that. Number one, even if you were to reduce the league to 20 teams or 16 teams or even like 12 teams or 10 teams, you're always going to have at least a couple teams that just aren't as good as the rest, or just aren't very good in general. So it's just kind of one of those things. It is what it is. And then the other thing is, basketball is such more of a global game now than it ever has been before. There's so much talent from all around the world. We have a G League, obviously college. There's so many people that play that I think that makes for more than enough room for two more teams to enter the fold. So I think the NBA would be better off for it. Like I said, both of these teams are in pretty high-cost cities, Las Vegas and Seattle. The bid, as you see in the tweet that I showed, it's going to be in the billions of dollars. And these teams are going to generate more money for the league. So that's really the bottom line. I don't see why they don't make this move. And as most others project, I think they will eventually take the plunge and vote for Las Vegas and Seattle to be eventually added as NBA cities. All right, guys, so now we're going to switch things over to the baseball side of things, where, side note, the season starts, I believe, later this week, as a matter of fact. I keep forgetting that it starts in March now instead of April. They shortened spring training. But before that, we kind of have the unofficial starts in MLB season with the World Baseball Classic that just took part that took place rather in the last couple of weeks. Of course, it ended a few days ago with Team Venezuela winning the gold medal of the World Baseball Classic by beating Team USA 3-2 in the final there in Miami. It was a thrilling tournament. I didn't make a prediction before the World Baseball Classic, but I did say that if there's a sleeper team, that it would be Team Venezuela. There's a ton of MLB talent on that team, and they really showed it all tournament long, playing all those games there in Miami, which it was just an incredible scene. It's incredible to watch just to see the atmosphere of the fans throughout these places in the World Baseball Classic. There in Miami and Houston and Tokyo. Hearing the horns playing and the drums. You got the fans cheering. Incredible postseason-like atmosphere early on in March. And what a great thing for MLB to have and to wrap their arms around, even though they got some criticism because they didn't really show it as prominently on TV as they probably should have, given the quality of the games and the great atmosphere. But still, great overall thing. Team Venezuela does come on top, beating Team USA. So Team USA does finish second for the second World Baseball Classic in a row. They did in 2023 when they lost to Japan. But I do gotta say, guys, this Team USA team didn't seem to be quite as endearing as some of the past Team USA teams that they've had for the World Baseball Classic. From Aaron Judge not exactly being the most inspiring leader, to Bryce Harper saying things like, no offense to the World Baseball Classic, but the Olympics, that's really the top tier event as far as world sports goes. To Cal Rowley, the catcher, he didn't dap up a couple of his Seattle Mariner teammates who were playing for some of the other nations, kind of stiffen them. Didn't really make them the most endearing team. And then, the way they got in, they didn't even win their pool. It was Italy that won their pool. They beat them 8-6. And then, so they kind of snuck into the quarterfinals and the semifinals. So obviously, you had that controversial game against the Dominican Republic, which they did win 2-1. But that last call most definitely was a ball, and it really wasn't disputable. You could pretty much see that. It was easy to see on TV with the Cade zone angle. It was pretty much clearly a ball. But they called it a strike, and US won the game. And then, of course, you had the final game where they really struggled to hit. Bryce Harper did have that dramatic 2-run homer in the 8th inning. That seemed like, okay, Team USA is making a comeback, but then Venezuela struck back at the top of the 9th, and then Team USA just couldn't do anything in the bottom of the 9th, and that was the ball game, and that was the World Baseball Classic. So, not exactly the most endearing team, and when you look at the festive atmosphere, the USA team kind of seemed a bit more subdued compared to the other teams. Not to say that they weren't celebrating at all, because they were. But when you look at the Dominican Republic, those guys would hit a home run, and that whole team would come out of the dugout celebrating, posing. Team Venezuela did the same thing. Team Japan even did the same thing. You saw how festive the fans were, how loud they were. And you just saw the difference between them and Team USA, who kind of had a bit of a too cool for school-ish type of attitude. So all those things didn't really make them the most endearing team. And as you see, Team Venezuela came out on top. So congrats to them. And then finally, before we get on out here, we're going to go ahead and get into college basketball. It is officially March Madness season as the NCAA tournament got underway a few days ago. And there's actually games going on right now as I speak here on Sunday. But not quite as many upsets as I thought there would be. There was a few because that's what the NCAA tournament is good for. That's one of the things it's most known for are the Cinderella teams. But most of those have been knocked out, and a lot of people are speculating it could be because of the the NIL thing, where you have players, going from school to school. The chemistry is not quite the same with these teams. That's a very important thing in basketball, and some other factors as well. But still compelling games. You got Kentucky, Santa Clara. That was a crazy game. There's a few others, like High Point had some good showings. They upset Wisconsin. That Nebraska-Vanderbilt game was crazy yesterday, especially with that buzzer beater that kind of went in and out from past half court from the Vandy. That was crazy. It's had some great moments. And I tell you, a lot of these freshman players that have been highly talented all season, they have been showing up and showing out so far in the NCAA tournament. So that's been great to see. Can't wait to see the games today. And we'll see who's in. A couple teams have already made it to the Sweet 16. I think we're going to get a very compelling tournament. It's going to be mostly top heavy, but that's fine, because mostly we watch basketball to see the Cinderellas, but we want to see the Blue Bloods in the Final Four and the national championships and so on and so forth. And I think that's what we're going to get with this tournament. My bracket is busted against my better judgment. I actually made one. And like most of America's, it's pretty much obsolete. But that's neither here nor there. That's to be expected. And that's what I get for making a bracket. But, I mean, at the same time, it's fun to make one. So that is what it is on that front. But anyway, guys, that's going to be it for today's video. Please, as always, like, share, comment, and subscribe. Also, hit the notification bell so you can get notified when I drop a new video or a new short in the future. As always, you could be anywhere else in the world, but you're here with me, and I appreciate that. So until next time, y'all, Gwen Steve out.